before we go ahead, let us see Arvind plays a king. So Arvind has been chosen to act as a king in the school play, and he had expected to march solemnly in splendid robes, to twirl his moustaches and wield the silver paper wrapped sword with gusto. Imagine his surprise when he was told he would also have to sit and play a veena and recite poetry. A musician king. Who was that? He wondered. So we'll see about the new empires and kingdoms, prashastis, and what they tell us. Arvind was supposed to be acting as Samudragupta. Samudragupta, a famous ruler of a dynasty known as Guptas. And we know about him, Samudragupta, from a long inscription, actually a poem in Sanskrit composed by his court poet Harisena, the court poet, nearly 1700 years ago. So this was inscribed on the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad, now Prayagraj. So this inscription is of a special kind known as prashasti, a Sanskrit word meaning in praise of. So which, while these prashastis were composed for some of the rulers, we read about them already, such as Gautami Putra Shri Satakarni, they became far more important from the time of the Guptas. Samudragupta's Prashasti. So we'll have a look at Samudragupta's Prashasti, what it tells us. The poet praised the king in glowing terms as a warrior, as a king who won victories in battle, who was learned and the best of poets. He is also described as equal to the gods. So the Prashasti was composed in very long sentences. So we'll look at one of such sentences. Samudragupta, the warrior, whose body was most charming, being covered with plenteous beauty of marks of hundreds of scars caused by battle axes, arrows, spikes, spears, barbed darts, swords, iron clubs, javelins, barbed arrows, long arrows, and many other weapons. So we'll look at the map. We'll notice the area which is shaded in green. I'll just take you there. But you will also find a series of dots along the east coast. And this east coast, you will find areas marked in purple and blue as well. So this map is what we are going to see is based on the information provided in the Prashastis. Harisena described 4 different kind of rulers and tells us about Samudragupta's policies toward them. The rulers of Aryavarta, the area which is shaded in green, let me take you there so that you just have a glimpse of what we are talking about. So these are the places we'll be talking about. These are important cities and kingdoms, and they are inner states, outer states, and Aryavarta. So what cities are being conquered by the Guptas? We'll have a look at this in discussion as well. So the rulers of Aryavarta, the area which you'll see in the map here, there were 9 rulers who were uprooted and their kingdoms were made part of Samudragupta Empire. The rulers of the Dakshin and Dakshin Path, here there were 12 rulers, some of whose capitals are marked with some dots. They surrendered to Samudragupta after being defeated, and he then allowed them to rule again. And the inner circle of the neighboring state, including the Assam, coastal Bengal, Nepal, and a number of Gana Sanghas in the northwest, which are also marked on the map. So they brought tribute, followed his order, and attended his court. The rulers of the outlying areas, which is marked in, in the map, perhaps the descendants of Kushanas and Shakas, and the ruler of Sri Lanka, who submitted to him and offered daughters in marriage. So this is an example of what we found, the king who played Veena. So some of the qualities of Samudragupta is shown in this coin where he is shown playing Veena. So this is Prayagraj, which is the name of Allahabad now, Ujjain and Patliputra. This is Patliputra. This is Ujjain, and we have the Prayaga also, Prayagraj, which is the Allahabad. Previously it was called Allahabad. And the Samudragupta treated the rulers Aryavarta and Dakshinapata in a different way. Why? Because some were defeated and some they accepted defeat without fighting. So these are the region we are talking about. These are the inner states, these are the outer states, and these are the Aryavartas. Now the genealogies. So what is this genealogies? Most Prashastis also mention the ancestor of the ruler, and this one mentions the Samudragupta's great grandfather, father and mother. His mother Kumara Devi belonged to the Lichavi Gana, while his father Chandragupta was the first ruler of Gupta dynasty to adopt the grand title of Maharaj Adhiraj, a title that Samudragupta also used. His great-grandfather and grandfather, these are mentioned simply as Maharajas. So it seems that if the family gradually rose to importance, how? So Samudragupta in turn figures in the list of ancestor, which is genealogies of later rulers of the dynasties, such as his son Chandragupta II. So we know about him from the inscriptions and coins. So he led an expedition to Western India, where he overcame the last of Shakas. And according to a later belief, his court was full of learned people, including Kalidas, the poet, and the Aryabhatta, the astronomer. We'll talk about them in the later discussion. Harshavardhana and Harshacharitra. Harshvardhan and Harshcharitra. While we can learn about Gupta rulers from the inscriptions and coins, we can find out about some kings from the biographies. Harshvardhan, who ruled nearly 1400 years ago, was one such ruler. His court poet Banabhatta wrote his biography, the Harshacharitra, in Sanskrit. So this gives us the genealogy of Harsha, and the ends with his becoming king. Xuanzang, we have already discussed about him, also spent a lot of time at Harsha's court and left a detailed account of what he witnessed, he saw. Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but became king of Thanesar after both his father and elder brother died. And his brother-in-laws were the ruler of Kannauj, and he was killed by the ruler of Bengal. Harsh took over the kingdom of Kannauj and then led an army against the ruler of Bengal. So although he was successful in the east and conquered both Magad and Bengal, he was not as successful elsewhere. He tried to cross the Narmada to march into the Deccan, but was stopped by a ruler belonging to Chalukya dynasty, Pulkeshin II. The Pallavas, Chalukyas and Pulkeshins Prashastri. So the Pallavas and Chalukyas were the most important ruling dynasties in South India during that period. So the kingdom of Pallavas spread from the region around their capital, which is Kanchipuram, to the Kaveri Delta. while that of the Chalukyas was centered around the Raichur Dam between the rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra. Aihole, the capital of Chalukyas, was an important trading center. So it developed as a religious center with number of temples. The Pallavas and Chalukyas, they frequently raided one another's land, especially attacking the capital cities, which were prosperous towns. The best known Chalukya and the best known Chalukya ruler was Pulkeshin II. What we know about him from Prashasti, composed of his court poet Ravi Kriti. So this tells us about his ancestor, who are traced back through 4 generations from father to son. Pulkeshin evidently got the kingdom from his uncle. According to this Ravi Kriti, he led expeditions along both west and east coasts. And besides, he checked the advance of Harsha. There is an interesting play of words in the poem. Harsha means happiness. So the poet says that after his defeat, Harsha was no longer Harsha. Pulkeshin also attacked the Pallava king and who took shelter behind the walls of Kanchipuram. But the Chalukya victory was short-lived. Ultimately, both Pallavas and Chalukyas gave way to new rulers belonging to the Rashtrakuta and Chola dynasties. How were these kingdoms administered? So, as in the case of earlier kings, land revenue remained important for these rulers, taxes, and the village remained the basic unit of administration. So there were some new developments as well. So king adopted a number of steps to win the support of men who were powerful, either economically or socially or because of their political and military strength. For example, some important administrative posts were now hereditary, which means that sons succeed father to their post. For example, the poet Harisena was a Mahadandanayaka or you can say Mahadandanayaka, chief judicial officer like his father. Sometimes one person held many offices. For instance, beside being a Mahadandanayaka, Harisena was a Kumaramatya, meaning and important minister, Kumaramatya, and a Sandhi Vigrahika, meaning a minister of war and peace. And besides, important men probably had a say in local administration. These included the Nagara Shreshti, or Nagara Shreshti means chief banker or merchant of the city, or Sarthavaha, or leader of the merchant canvas, or Prathama Kulika, or the chief craftsman, and the head of the Kayasthas, or scribes. So these policies were reasonably effective, but sooner or later some of these powerful men grew strong enough to set up independent kingdoms. So a new kind of army, like earlier rulers, some of these kings maintained a well-organized army with elephants, chariots, cavalry and foot soldiers. Besides, there were military leaders who provided the king with troops whenever he required or need them. So they were not paid regular salaries. Instead, some of them received grants of land. So they collected revenue from the land and used this to maintain the soldier and horses and provide equipment for warfare. So these men were known as Samantas. So whenever the ruler was weak, Samantas tried to become independent. So assemblies in the southern kingdoms, the inscription of the Pallavas mention a number of local assemblies. These include the Sabha, which was an assembly of Brahmin land owners. So this assembly functioned through subcommittees which looked after irrigation, agriculture operations, making road, local temples, etc. The Ur was a village assembly found in areas where the land owners were not Brahmins, and the Nagaram was an organization of merchants. So it is likely that these assemblies were controlled by rich and powerful landowners and merchants. Many of these local assemblies continued to function for centuries. What about the ordinary people in the kingdoms. So we can catch an occasional glimpse of the lives of ordinary people from plays and other accounts. So let us have a look at some of these. Kalidas is known for his plays depicting life in the king's court. So an interesting feature about these plays is that king and most Brahmins are shown as speaking Sanskrit, while women and men other than the king and Brahmins use Prakrit. So his most famous play, Avijana Shakuntalam, is the story of the love between a king named Dushyant and a young woman named Shakuntala. So we find an interesting description of the plight of a poor fisherman in this play. So a fisherman finds a ring. Let us see what we get from Abhijana Shakuntalam. A fisherman found a precious ring which the king had given to Shakuntala, but which had been accidentally swallowed by a fish. Now when he went to the palace with it, the gateman accused him of theft, and the chief police officer were rather rude. However, the king was happy when he saw the ring and sent a reward for the fisherman. Then the police officer and the gateman decided to take a share of the reward and went along with the fresh fisherman to have a drink. The Chinese pilgrim Fa Xian noticed the plight of those who were treated as untouchables by high and mighty. They were expected to live on the outskirts of the city, and he also writes, if such a man enters a town or a marketplace, he strikes a piece of wood in order to keep himself separate. People hearing this sound know what it means and avoid touching him or brushing against him. And Banabhatta provided us with a vivid picture of king's army on the move, and which was the king's army. The king traveled with an enormous amount of equipment. Apart from the weapons, there were things of daily use such as pots, pans, furniture, gold footstools, food, including animals such as goat, deer, rabbits, vegetables, spices carried on carts or loaded on the pack animals such as camels and elephants. So this huge army was accompanied by musicians beating drums and others playing horns and trumpets. So villagers had to provide hospitality along the way. They came with the gifts of curd, gur, and flowers and provided fodder for the animals. They also tried to meet the king and place their complaints and petitions before him. The army left a trail of destruction behind. Elephants often trampled down the huts of villagers, and the oxen yoked to the caravans of merchants ran away, scared by the tumult. And Banabhatta says, the whole world was swallowed up in dust. So what was going elsewhere? Arabia. Although it is a desert, it was at the hub of communication for centuries. In fact, these Arab merchants and the sailors, they played important role in the sea trade between India and Europe. So other who lived in Arabia were the Bedouins, pastoral tribes, depending mainly on like hardy animal camels that could survive in the desert. So around 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad introduced a new religion, Islam, in Arabia. Like Christianity, Islam was a religion that laid stress on the equality and unity of all before Allah, the one supreme God. So here is a verse of Quran, the sacred book of Islam. For Muslim men and women, for believing men and women, and for devout men and women, for true men and women, for men and women who are patient and constant, for men and women who humble themselves, for men and women who give in charity, for men and women who fast, for men and women who guard their chastity, and for men and women who engage much in Allah's remembrance, for them whom Allah prepared forgiveness and great reward. So within 100 years of Islam spread to North Africa, Spain, Iran and India. Arab sailors who were already familiar with the coastal settlements of this subcontinent now brought the new religion with them, and Arab soldiers conquered Sindh, which is present-day Pakistan, about 1300 years ago.